When prosecutors bring a case to the grand jury, they're not guessing. That grand jury is deciding whether a charge is coming and how serious it's going to be. And that's why what's happening right now in the d4vd case matters. Because once a case reaches this stage, the question isn't, is the system moving? It's how far is it willing to go? This is Crime News Cross-Examine. Let's jump in. Public reporting indicates that a case connected to d4vd is now under grand jury review. There are no public charges, however, no official accusations, and no confirmed findings released by authorities. But a grand jury doesn't appear unless prosecutors believe the case has reached a decision point. This isn't rumor territory anymore. It's evaluation. If you're here for speculation, this is not that video. But if you want to understand what the legal system is actually doing and why, stay with me. What is the prosecution thinking right now? Here's the part most people never hear. Prosecutors don't take cases to a grand jury unless they believe charges are very likely. And grand juries indict in the overwhelming majority of cases, not because they're biased, but because prosecutors control what evidence is shown and when. So by the time a case reaches this stage, the state usually believes some charges tied to the investigation are legally supportable. And when a death is involved, a death of a minor and the involvement of a celebrity vehicle and a supposed relationship, that almost always raises the level of seriousness, even if the final charge hasn't been decided yet. Now, that doesn't mean guilt, but it does mean the state believes the legal threshold has been met. Yes, from the defense perspective, this can be a very perilous time. However, if prosecutors were already confident enough to charge, why didn't they do so from the very beginning? And the fact that this case is still unfolding suggests unanswered questions, evidence still being weighed, and timelines still being tested. For these reasons, defense silence matters more than anything at this stage, because anything that they say publicly can influence prosecutors to frame the case before it's finalized. Let's cross-examine. Whatever happens, however, is just the beginning. This is where people often misunderstand the process. A grand jury does not decide guilt. It does not weigh the credibility of witnesses the way a trial jury does. And it does not operate under the same presumption of innocence that a defendant is entitled to at a jury trial. At this stage, the question is not, did the person do it? The question is there enough evidence to move forward and open the case? That's it. And that's a much lower bar than a regular trial jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's why grand juries indict so often. So, depending on the evidence, it could mean very little right now, or it could mean if the case is strong, you better take a plea. Turning to the law. Legally, the standard here at the grand jury stage is one of probable cause. And what does that mean? That means that the suspect at issue, more likely than not, was involved in a certain specified criminal offense under the California Code. However, at this stage, the evidence can be incomplete. Facts can be still evolving, and conclusions usually are not final. A grand jury exists to test whether the case is strong enough to move into the open, not to decide guilt. Now here's my read. If this case is before the grand jury as we hear, prosecutors likely believe that serious charges related to the death investigation of Celeste Rivas are supportable. What that charge or charges may be relating to the death, there are many options under the California Criminal Code, and I will not speculate here as to what those may be until we receive the entire evidence in the case, what the grand jury was privy to. But that does not mean guilt. It does not mean that the facts are settled at this point. It does mean that the case has reached a legal crossroads. And what happens next will depend entirely on what the evidence can actually tell us as to what actually happened and when to Celeste Rivas. If charges are actually filed in this case, I will break them down carefully and responsibly. And if they aren't, that silence will matter just as much. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for legal analysis, not speculation. For more coverage of this case and many more, visit CrimesDigest.com. And always remember, the truth matters, and so does reasonable doubt. See you in the next episode.